The most unlikely puppet in Iran. Stunning new details tonight breaking about a U.S.-Israeli plan to install the former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad back in power. He, of course, is a hardliner. Now, the New York Times is revealing the existence of this plan, which played out like an action movie, even reporting that Ahmadinejad himself was consulted about it. Now, Ahmadinejad was under house arrest as the war began. I mean, he was a hardliner who called for the end of Israel, but he had fallen out of favor with Iran's powerful regime circles, right? He was under house arrest. Now, then Ahmadinejad gets injured at an Israeli strike near his home on the first day of the war. I don't know if you remember that. I mean, wow, they're going for him too? No. The strike was designed to kill the Revolutionary Guard soldiers who were holding him under house arrest. And Ahmadinejad's current whereabouts now are unknown. He has not been heard from since that strike, which raises major questions, to state the obvious, of where is he? Who controls him? This comes as today Trump says the war will resume, quote, very quickly if Iran doesn't reach a deal. Out front now is Mark Mazzetti, investigative reporter for the New York Times, who broke this story on Ahmadinejad. And Mark, I mean, it really is incredible reporting. As I said, you know, it reads like it's out of some sort of a thriller, except for this is real life. You're reporting that Trump and Israel wanted to install a person as ruler of Iran who was a fierce supporter of Iran's nuclear program and had vowed to wipe Israel off the map. That was then, though. Now he was under house arrest, and they felt he could be sort of like Delcy Rodriguez?
Yeah, so I think most people's remembrances of Ahmadinejad go back some time, as you discussed, the Holocaust denying and the promoting Iran's nuclear program, and he got lampooned on Saturday Night Live, and that was the image of Ahmadinejad, who over time did, as you said, become a regime critic, so much that they began to question his loyalties. And that's why he was under house arrest for the last period of time. Now, sometime before the war, he was in contact with, we believe, Israeli and American officials, primarily Israeli officials. He had contacts to basically sign off on this idea that if a war were to begin and he were to be freed, he would be part of the regime change plan. As you said, it's quite shocking that this was part of the plan, and then even more shocking that on the first day of the war, an Israeli strike hits the guard tower of his house, but also injures him. And then he becomes sort of disillusioned with the whole plan, and it's seemingly out of the picture for the moment.
Okay, so let me read something else from your reporting about that strike, which Iranian news outlets initially reported killed Ahmadinejad, right? I remember that day, just, you know, sort of stunned at what the scope of this. You write, Mark, the strike did not significantly damage Mr. Ahmadinejad's house at the end of a dead-end street, but the security outpost at the entrance of the street was struck. Satellite images shows that building was destroyed. In the days that followed, official news agencies clarified that he had survived, but that his bodyguards, in actuality, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps members, who were both guarding him and holding him under house arrest, were killed. And then, obviously, we can see the destruction in the before and after satellite images of his house. But, okay, so as part of this, you're saying, well, then he'd been talking to Israeli officials. I mean, just to even think about the implications of that within the Iranian regime. Now his whereabouts are unknown. So, I mean, I can think of a lot of conspiracy theories here that suddenly become possibilities, Mark. I mean, do you have any sense of where he might be or what the extent of his injuries are or what's happening there?
In terms of his injuries, we have, me and my colleagues who were reporting the story, heard that he did not sustain life-threatening injuries, that they were light injuries, that he is alive. But in terms of his whereabouts, we don't know. We don't know where he is. We don't know whose custody he is in, his safety, the safety of his associates. These are some of the questions we still have and are continuing to report out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking back, you know, in the war in Israel, where I was at the time, people discussing certain senior members of the regime, and at the time they were all conspiracy theories, obviously, about whether they were in Tel Aviv or what might be. I mean, this is all just stunning to even think about what this opens the door to. Now, Trump and his top advisors, Mark, as you know, have been really mixed about regime change in Iran and whether that was part of this. Although obviously, by taking out the supreme leader and everyone around him, it's pretty obvious that it is what it is. But Trump has denied regime change as a goal of the war several times. Here he is.
Regime change was not our goal. We didn't do this for regime change. We went in for a very simple reason, and not regime change.
So with the chaos that has ensued since the war started, Mark, how much did Israel count on this Ahmadinejad plan coming to fruition? Did they think they had sort of a bird in the hand? They had a Delsi and ready to go?
Well, first off, when the first act of the war is killing the supreme leader of Iran, I think that raises questions about just the extent that you wanted regime change, and certainly you were trying to change the leadership, right? And to your point about just where Ahmadinejad fit in, it seems that they saw him as someone who could be sort of running the bureaucracy, running the machinery, and a more pliable leader to do what the United States and Israel wanted. It's not wholesale change of everyone on all levels of leadership, but is someone who they had been potentially grooming, who could basically, the Delsi model in Venezuela, could be someone who would be more pro-Western. So as much as American officials want to say that they do not care, that they're not goal of regime change, Iran certainly saw this as an existential war, and changing the leadership was certainly central to the mission of the war.
Kareem, I mean, on this idea of a letter of intent, on what we're learning about the New York Times reporting that this former Iranian president, Ahmadinejad, was in this plan to make him the new leader of Iran. They bombed his house where he was being kept captive by IRGC guards. I don't even really understand how that plan was supposed to work. But then he survived it, but he became disillusioned with the regime change plan after it. I mean, just big picture, what do you make of all of this?
Well, that's a crazy story, Caitlin, because I was based in Tehran when Ahmadinejad was first elected in 2005, and his 8-year presidency was known for three things: denying the Holocaust, calling for Israel to be wiped off the map, and advancing Iran's nuclear program. Prime Minister Netanyahu, a decade and a half ago, called Ahmadinejad the Iranian Hitler. So the idea that 10, 15 years later, Israel and the United States wanted to install him as Iran's next president, it really defies belief. Now, it's true that Ahmadinejad over the last several years had become more of kind of an internal critic, but he had no institutional power. There was no chance that he could be Iran's Delcy Rodriguez.
There's also this New York Times report, which I found fascinating, that the former president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who many Americans likely will remember, was actually the choice by Israel and with the knowledge of the United States to be the next leader of Iran. Do you find that odd?
That's diplomatic understatement that I find it odd. It makes me think The Onion is putting out the story rather than the New York Times.
It says that, according to the reporting, Ahmadinejad was kind of in on it until the Israelis, they bombed his property, which was apparently to get him released from house arrest. And yet then somehow he changed his mind after that, and now he hasn't been seen out.
Well, this whole thing is remarkably far-fetched, as is the entire idea of regime change in Iran. The idea that military force was going to trigger regime change, and you were then going to get an Iranian leader who was willing and able to cut a deal with you that you could live with was far-fetched. The idea that Ahmadinejad, a Holocaust denier and worse, could have been that person, it's really head-shaking.
Do you think it's not true, or do you think it's just bizarre?
I think either way, his life is either soon going to be over or it is over. It's certainly bizarre if it's true, the idea that people singled him out as someone we could work with.
The fact that he hasn't been seen, he was seen briefly, and now he hasn't been seen of since. That doesn't bode well in Iran ever.
No, and again, this isn't a regime that's been, killed, 30,000 or more people? If they had to kill somebody else, I don't think they would morally balk at that.